Right, I think we are live. Hello, everybody, to Ruby Tuesday, KL 91 and Penang. I think it's 40. Sorry, I forgot the number for Penang. 40. Wow, it's Ruby Tuesday 40 for Penang. Not bad, not bad. All right, so I guess we can kickstart that off. Welcome everybody to Ruby Tuesday, brought to you by Engineers MY and KL Ruby Brigade. We're on Facebook. Well, there is some posts on Facebook. So yeah, check out our Facebook group. If you're looking for Ruby jobs or just want to know how the community is doing, to drop by. There's always job posting available there. I think the most recent one, Grid, you share, someone is looking for a Rails engineer in KL. So yeah, definitely check out the Facebook group if you're interested. Meetup is where all the meetup details are in. We are kind of discussing whether we want to do a hybrid one next month. So definitely follow us on Meetup to see the details. GitHub for all code related stuff. We're most active on Slack, so definitely check us out there. There's also a jobs channel in Slack. Also, if you're looking for opportunities, I think the most recent one we had was last month. There was a company from Netherlands looking for Rails engineer as well. So yeah, definitely check out Slack. Even I think recently, Gui, you posted about OpenSSL issue with the new Ubuntu, and yeah, you were having a lot of a discussion with everybody else there. So yep. Yeah, we sometimes use Discord as well for our code clinic or any larger events or any larger calls. So yeah, definitely join us in Discord as well. Right. By the way, I'm Gui, KL, and with me is Gui Penang.
Hi, I'm Gui from Penang.
Right. Yeah, just a quick reminder. Your comment or chat might appear on the stream. So yeah, especially if you ask a question, we want to highlight it to everybody. So just a quick reminder on that. Second reminder, we do follow the Ruby community conduct guideline. So if you're participating, please be aware of the event code of conduct. I think I just briefly touched upon hiring shoutouts earlier, which was there was a company from Netherlands in the Slack job channel and also a company in KL hiring as well in the Facebook group. So yeah, look out for those opportunities. Right, today we have Helio joining us to give a talk about Rails MultiDB. Helio,
Hi there.
you ready to share with us?
Yes, I'm ready to start.
All right.
All right, so let me share my screen here, and I am going to get started. Maybe it's coming a little bit. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Now it's coming up.
All right. Take it away.
All right. Okay, everybody. Thanks, guys, for having me, and I'm happy to be here and share a little bit of what I've learned on about Rails MultiDB recently. So the title of my talk today is ActiveRecord Support to Multiple Databases. So a little bit about me. My name is Helio Koller. I've been doing software development for 21 years and primarily work with Ruby on Rails for 12 years. And that's kind of a quick skinny about me. So here's the agenda of the talk. So Rails 6 in the ActiveRecord MultiDB public API. That starts with Rails 6. I'm going to show a little bit about the most common scenarios. I'm going to talk about and show a little bit of code and models and DB migrations, how these things are done in a multi-database scenario. A little bit about my production setup, and if I have time, I'll talk a little bit of back in the day, some historical information about Rails and multiple databases. So the reason why I got this talk is because so Rails MultiDB is not something new. It started with Rails 6 around 2018, so about 4 years ago. But I never had to use it, never needed to use it up until last month when I actually had a good use case to start using. So I decided to do it. And then after I deployed to production, I decided to kind of write this talk and come here to share with you guys. So here is so Rails 6 in the ActiveRecord API. So here's a little bit of a summary of everything you can do. You can have multiple writer databases and a replica for each one of them. You can do automatic switch based on the model that you're working. And you can have an automatic swap between writer and replica based on an HTTP verb and support to database migration. And there's a good support to database migration and interacting with your databases. So that's kind of a summary of what ActiveRecord got introduced to ActiveRecord as part of the multi-DB API. So here's the supported scenarios that I'll be talking today. So a single app database with a read replica. And in the multi-databases scenarios, you have a couple options, with or without a read replica, and with the same or a different database schema. ActiveRecord also supports sharding, but I'm not going to be talking about sharding today. There's a couple sections that I will skip. I will just kind of summarize a little bit for you guys. So here's here's a scenario where we have a single app, and I'm using kind of the RubyMy logo here to kind of to my Rails application. And I have my app database, and this is the primary, and this is the replica. And the replica is one of these blue thing and this error. That's the best I could find to differentiate these two databases. The main goal of ActiveRecord in this scenario in Rails is to route all the right SQL queries to the primary database, let Postgres or your database underneath replicate the data to the read replica, and your Rails application is going to read from replica. So that you kind of balance the load between these two in a natural way, just using write and read operations. And this is what your database YAML is going to look like. Basically, I'm just going to show you development just for simplicity, but you're going to have something like this for all environments that your Rails application supports. So you have your primary database, adapted database, username and password, all the things that we already know about database YAML. And then you have the primary replica. And then the only difference in here is that you have a replica true. So that's kind of how you configure your application. So as far as your database YAML, if you're setting these up, it's just a matter of you creating these, and then you have your infrastructure, building your database, and so on and so forth, that kind of stuff. So this is a scenario now we have a multiple databases. And what I mean by multiple databases is databases that have different data. So here I have my application. I have read and write, not only write to my application database, right? The main database. And let's imagine that I'm designing my data where the accounting data go to a separate database. So the users, everything else comes in here, and accounting data come over here. So in these scenarios, you have two master database, no replication, read and write in both of them. And then your database YAML, the way it's going to look like is primary is your primary database, which is my app database, and then accounting is your accounting database. So all the same, there is no replica here, but now you have these two different configurations. And then each configuration is going to have their own server. Like I didn't put the host in here, but all the typical database YAML configuration goes the same way. Okay. And the other scenario is the same multi-database with a read replica. So now here, only writes go to the primary, the read operations go to the replica. The same way you have that for the app database, you're going to have the same for the accounting database. And then you have all the write operations go to your primary, and the read operations go to your replica. And in your database YAML, you just kind of have those two combined. For your app database, you have primary, where you have your app database, and you have the primary replica set with a replica true. And then you have the accounting database, which has your account DB information, and then you have the accounting replica. So these are all the scenarios the most common scenarios that I wanted to kind of share with you guys today. And this is kind of how the database YAML is going to start. It's going to look like for each one of those scenarios. Okay. And this is the setup that I put in production recently. So I didn't have the need to route all the read and write to the replica database. So I only wanted to route to my read replica some slow queries. We have some reporting features, and I was like, there was people doing reporting the last month, and I was like, this is using the reporting usage is growing too much. And I decided, like, okay, I want to give it a try on these and see how this is going to affect my users. So, and then I kept all the read and write in the same database and the slow read in here. And then in my case, the database YAML behaves the same way, but I'm going to have to configure, there's some special configurations to make my Rails application to do read and write in the same database. And then I can configure some background jobs, some background operations to use my replica. So my database YAML is pretty much primary and primary replica. Okay. So now here, I'm going to show you a little bit of code and how these things works in your models. So this is a scenario where we have the first scenario that we were talking showed, where you have the primary and the read replica. So what happened with the primary and the way you configure your models to deal with these is through the application record. So you probably already have an application record in your application if you're on Rails 6 and above, or maybe Rails 5. I don't remember exactly when that was introduced. But now with the multi-database, you added this connects to database line. And then what this tells Rails is, if you're doing write operations, I want you to use the primary database. If you're using the reading, if Rails is trying to do a reading operation, you want Rails to use the primary replica. And then that's pretty much what you need to do. That's the most common scenario. That's the scenario where you route the writes to the primary and the reads to the replica. And then your model stays the same, right? So you don't need to worry about anything. User is already inherits from application record, and then application record is configured to make write operations to the primary database and reading operations to the primary replica. So now moving forward, this is a scenario where we have multi-database. I have my app database and my accounting database, and I want to read and write to go to each one of them accordingly. Write, go to the primary, read to read. That's in the app, and the same goes for accounting. So now here, my application record remains the same, that we already saw how that works. Now I'm going to create an accounting record that inherits from ActiveRecord base. This is also an abstract class. And then here, instead of connecting to the primary database, I'm going to connect to the writing and accounting replica, right? So now my account model, which is the data that I'm stored in my accounting database, inherits from the accounting record. And then, as you can see here, and can start to imagine, when I'm dealing with these models, user and account, I have no idea what database it is. So, and I don't need to care about it. So all of that is done through the ActiveRecord connects to API. So it totally encapsulates and abstracts that from your code. Your code is dealing with users and accounts. So you don't need to worry about when you write any feature, which is a cool thing. It's a good encapsulation, is a cool thing. So you don't need to deal with that. You need to keep in your mind that you have all these infrastructure connected separately, all these different databases, replicas, and so on and so forth. And oh, I'm making an insert query, and then I need to manage my database. No, you don't. It's very opinionated in a way that it gets encapsulated, it gets set up, and then you deal with your models exactly the same way. So that's a good thing. At least I think so. So, and this is my setup. Remember that I told it was a little bit different, right? I have read and write to the primary, and then I have this low read to my app replica. So the way my application record looks like was like this. The writing operation still goes to primary. The reading operations also goes to primary. And my slow reading role goes to the primary replica. So which when I configure this writing role, reading role, all going to the primary, it makes all the read and writes go to my primary database. And then in my background job, where I want to route some tons of SQL queries that's using a lot of resources, that's not user related, and is dealing with data from the previous month, and so on and so forth, I want to manually switch that active record to connect to the role slow reading. So that means that I'm going to be talking all the SQL queries that run inside this block, which is the execution of my report, goes to the slow read. So that's kind of what I put in production about a month ago. And this is another API that ActiveRecord support, which is the manual switching. You can manually tell your code to go to another one, to another role. And the role is going to determine what database you are accessing. So now let's talk a little bit about database migration, right? We already saw how database YAML is configured. We saw how the models needs to be configured, application record and accounting record and so on. So now let's see what DB migrations look like, right? So there's a good support for this, right? Because it wouldn't make sense to have multi-database and then I can manage my data and my migrations in an easy fashion. So basically, the main thing that happened here is this -- database in Rails generate. So that's a new parameter that you can do that. And also the Rails core team. And also you can separate the migration folders for different schema. So I want to show a little bit more details of what this means. And then you can check out a little bit of the Rails -t, which shows all the Rails tasks and how they do it. But here there is a little glance of what it looks like. You're going to do Rails DB migrate primary, and then you're going to Rails DB migrate accounting. Those are the entities or how you name the database in the database YAML. There is also disable database tasks in case if you had some legacy database. If you want to connect to a legacy database or to a database that's not managed by this specific Rails application, right? Imagine if you're not in a monolith scenario where you have another one of the database that your Rails application needs to read data and maybe even insert data, but the migration is not managed by this application. In that case, you don't need these database tasks enabled or being displayed. So, all right, Rails generate, Rails G. So like I said, -- database, DB name. So this is what it looks like. Rails G migration, create account types, name string, right? We are used to do this. Every time I need to create a new table, and then I can line up all the fields, the name and the types here. And now I have a -- database accounting. And then that means that when you create, and then the same one for the scaffolding, Rails G scaffold account type, name string, database accounting. So when you do that, your model is going to inherit by accounting record, which is already configured to read and write from the accounting database. So if you do the opposite, if you use database primary, and then you put like a user metadata, then your model is going to inherit by the application record, which is the one that's going to render that database. And migration folders. So as you can see now, things are kind of falling into place. Your primary database stays in the same place, right? The place where we all know, DB migrate. That's where all that goes. And in the accounting database, where it goes, DB accounting migrate. So it's very simple. Stays very similar place, and then you all get used to that convention, and then you do it. And the most common migration tasks: Rails DB migrate primary, Rails DB rollback primary, Rails DB migrate accounting, Rails DB rollback accounting. All those other features in these Rails DB migrate and rollback, like step, if you do like step equals to 2, if you want to roll back 2 steps, and all those extra features, they work the same way. Nothing changes. Just these extra key here to indicate which database you are executing those operations. All right. And here is a quick glance of the Rails TE pipe grep DB, right? I'm just kind of listing only the database Rails tasks. And then you can see all of them: create accounting, create primary, drop accounting, drop primary, and then it goes all the way. So migrate, status. I don't think I ever used DB migrate stats before. I don't think I even knew before I wrote these slide. So, and I work with Rails for 12 years. That never never crossed my eye. DB reset, DB rollback, schema dump, schema load, setup, and all of that. So it kind of works in a very similar fashion. You just now, when you're multi-database, you need to tell the Rails task where you want to execute those tasks. In your primary database, in your account database, and so on and so forth. All right. So here's the legacy database, and the database task false. So imagine my database YAML. That's kind of how my database YAML would look like. I have my primary, my app database, my accounting that I'm using for my examples. And then in this case, because I need this accounting database does have its own schema, I have database tasks true. And then by legacy, a legacy database where it may not even need to be Postgres, can be whatever else. I don't need the database tasks because this application does not manage the migration of these database. It's an external third-party database, legacy database, or whatever. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it. And there's more. This is a lot of other things that you can take a look at, and because it's also supported by ActiveRecord. You have an automatic role switching in which Rails guarantee read your own write within a configured delay. This is an interesting topic. I wanted to kind of add this into this talk, but others I don't think will take too much time to kind of dive deep into this. But basically, if you're making a write operation to your database and you make a read operation right immediately after, within that configured delay, what Rails is going to do is Rails is going to make that read from your write database, from your primary database, just to avoid that data not being replicated to your replica database. And then you just create a record, and then you try to read it, and then you get key not found. So this is an interesting aspect, and I thought this is really, really interesting. Anyway, so there is horizontal sharding. I'm not talking about this today. Activating automatic shard switching as well, some more support to sharding. They have a granular database connection switching that allows you to execute operations reading and writing from different databases within a block. It's a bunch of things that you can do. I read very little about this. This wasn't the case. I didn't need that when I set up this database in my application, my Rails app, and there is a lot of stuff here as well. And there is now joins. I think this is coming in Rails 7. There is joins across different databases, but you need to be aware of performance. There is even a note in there in the documentation. All right. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, the current API support for Rails multi-DB that started with Rails 6. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the past, back in the day. So you can do Rails, you can plug Rails apps to multiple databases since pretty much ever. There is this gem, apartment gem, that was first released in 2011. Rails 3, we are Rails 7 now. It's really old stuff. And their latest release was 2019, where you could already, so this gem was to support multi-tenant scenarios. That's the most common scenario of using this gem. And then it basically tampers and it taps with the ActiveRecord base established connection to switch your connection between databases. So we'll look a little bit of that code and see what it looks like. This course also has a Rails multi-site gem, which the V100 was released in 2015. This gem is still being maintained, and this was extracted by the discourse code into a gem where you can manage a multi-database as well, and mostly for multi-tenant. We'll take a look at that code as well. And as a matter of fact, I redesigned an application back in 2015 that it was a single tenant application that I helped to redesign from single tenant to multi-tenant. And that talk is available in my speaker deck. And this was the very first ever talk that I ever gave in my life. And that was in 2015. So I will show a little bit of this code. It was funny to get into these because it kind of made me remember all this stuff that I learned a long time ago. Now there is a public API on ActiveRecord, so it's a lot easier to do. So here's the Apartment Jam. So this is the first release that they did, and in 2011. And basically, the way they switch the databases is to a known request on the Warden Manager. And if you have a session ID, user ID, I look up your user in the database, and then I switch to your database. So this is kind of the high level, how you tap into the Rails framework and then switch the database. And then that code, it's like this. And one thing that was funny looking at this code from 2011 is that apparently there is a tab in here and spaces in here. I don't know how people would read this code today. If someone writes a code like that today, what would happen? But anyway, and the code like uses like a weird tabbing space. I suspect that this probably wasn't in GitHub before, and there was some kind of automated way to move from other code versioning tools to GitHub, and then these things happen. Or anyway, I don't know. That's how the developers wanted to do. This is on April 18, 2011. It feels like it was another galaxy, another era, so it's so old. But basically, that's what the switch database do, right? We're just looking at this, right? So I decided that this user has a different database. I need to switch the database. So if database is new, I use the default. I get my default database. If not, I call this multi-tenantify with my config and my database. There's some puts in here. And then here, do the magic. I just tell ActiveRecord establish connection to another configuration. And then there is more puts in here, and there's some other stuff in here that I don't think I ever understood why these excluded models was used, and I actually never need to use. When I built my multi-tenant, when I designed my one single tenant app to be multi-tenant, I did read about these Apartment Jam, but this wasn't appropriate for me at that time. So I didn't end up using this one. And okay, so there was supposed to be some more slides in here that I forgot to put. But anyway, so I wanted to show a little bit more about it and to show how. Okay, so one of those, we are doing a demo problem. I have an older version of my deck and some missing slides. Anyway, I will post these on my speaker deck later on and put the latest things, but it will show how these two code. That's kind of so sad. So how this course does multi-text. Oh, I think I can probably open these here real quick. So let me see. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, yep. So let me open these. These I'm kind of having to go off here because my deck is missing some slides. So let me show you what I did, what my code looked like. So this is my old talk that I gave in 2015, another meetup. So basically, this is it, right? So this is the database switch. In my case, I was using MongoDB. It was a Rails app with a MongoDB. And basically, I was using Mongoid and override database. And I do the same thing. I create my class, a MongoDB switcher, and then I get the MongoDB switch and I inject in the middleware before the Warden Manager. So this is very similar to how Apartment Jam works, but this is not a jam. This is just a class that gets inserted into the middleware before the manager, the Warden Manager, and then does the switch. And then Mongoid override database does the same. So this is the code that I put in production. I used in 2015 to manage multi-tenant app. I have a Rails application that supports multi-tenants. Each tenant has their own database. And I used to do something similar to what Apartment Jam does over here. I have a main database that kind of shows each one of the user where the database is. So I find the record based not on the session ID, but from the URL, a partner ID that go from the URL, and then I find that user, I find that account and organization, and then I know which database I need to switch to. So that's kind of how my code was to look like. So if my slides were here, it will be showing these exact image. So now I think I have a little bit more time. So let me kind of go into, so what is the other one? Is Discord Rails multi-site. Rails multi-site jam GitHub. I think that's going to give me. All right, there you go. First one. So this, if my Wi-Fi here is not too slow, okay, there we go. So this is what I kind of wanted to show you. So the way Discord Rails multi-site does is they have a different YAML file, and they configure all the database credentials, and they even encapsulate for you the host names. So if you have a specific host name routed to that database, then you just configure here. And then you have another database, and then you have a different host names here. So the way, I think the problem that Rails discourse was trying to do is not about read and write, was about routing or ensure that every request from that specific host go to the same database. So that's kind of, and then they created their own YAML file to encapsulate that. And then they have operations very similar to what we have on Rails. You can do, like, you see each connection, and then you make a query each one of them. And then if you decided to do to make a query in one database, I haven't read too much about their API, but I believe it's possible to kind of find what connection you want and then read that if you're doing some background job like I was doing, like the problem that I had to do. All right, so I guess that is kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys today. And I hope you all enjoyed. And I had a lot of fun putting this talk together and learning about Rails MultiDB. And if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer. And if not, we'll thank you all for your time and your attention.
All right. Thank you, Helio. That's a very good and interesting talk about Rails MultiDB.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gwen.
While we wait for any questions from like the YouTube, anybody watching in YouTube, I do have a question. I think you mentioned about the database task that you can define in the configuration, I believe.
Yep.
Is it so that it doesn't generate a rake task for that specific database?
Yes. Okay. So basically what happened is these legacy database, the schema, right, is not managed by this application, right? So this is another database that I'm just reading data and maybe even writing data. So in that case, I don't need Rails DB migrate. I don't need Rails DB rollback on that database. So that's kind of what this does. So it prevents you from Rails to trying to tamper with this database. So if you configure it that way, then Rails migration tasks are not going to, there's no chance that any migration task is going to poke around the database.
Yeah, it does seems like it's a very useful like defensive mechanism in terms of like in this use case, you're trying to like not do any, for example, not do any writes to a legacy database. You just want to read. Then it would be good to have this as a more defensive mechanism. Yeah, that's good. Like today I learned about this.
Yeah, definitely. So these only manage the Rails tasks, the migration, the management tasks, right? The Rails database management tasks. You can still write to this database. You can have a model that kind of it taps into this configuration. I also did these like several years ago. I had a legacy database. It wasn't a Postgres. It was all my primary database was Postgres, and I have a legacy, which is a MySQL database. And it was an old app that we were refactoring, like it was swapping out, we were building a new one. But there was a bug that was annoying all the customers. a handful of customers kind of very often, and I kind of made a way to from my Rails application, which my primary data at that time they don't need primary, right? So you have only your app database. You can still build something like this and then create a model that you can write on that. So I managed to kind of fix a bug or give better tools to our support team to kind of fix a bug, a data bug in the legacy database. So this only manages the Rails database management tasks. Like these guys here, create a drop. Imagine you're not going to drop the database. So you don't want to drop, you don't want to do anything. So if you put a user here that has full access to the database, and if you don't create the database, then like Rails DB drop, Rails DB setup can, you don't run Rails DB setup in production. But anyway, so I think it's a defensive mechanism. I also like that. It's cool. And I used these before, so I kind of got my toes in the water a little bit on that as well.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, it seems like you don't have any questions from anybody watching YouTube, but Gui, do you have anything you want to bring up or ask about?
Yeah, previously I've used case with this. I also used the multi-DB approach for CTF. So it's a cybersecurity challenge. So I basically opened one vulnerability for SQL injection so that I have to isolate that database out of the other one so that it doesn't ruin the whole application. So I only open up one database for them to attack while keeping another one continue to work. So yeah, it's one of the use case for that.
Cool. What databases you're using? Postgres, MySQL?
No, both is Postgres. Yeah.
Okay.
But running on Docker. So there's I think there's a Docker image out there that allows you to set up multi-database at once. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So
yeah,
thank
that's
you.
all.
Thank you, guys. Go ahead. I'll take it back to you.
All right. Thank you. Share my screen. Yep. So there was Helio sharing his talk about Rails multi-DB. Yeah, that's the only talk for this week. Parking lot. Hold on, let me get Helio back in. But usually we have a section called parking lot where if anybody learned anything interesting about Ruby or Rails or something they encountered or tips they want to share, we usually share it during parking lot. I don't have anything to share this time around. Haven't been. Yeah, nothing for me actually. Gui, do you have anything?
I think the app OpenSSL. So for those who are interested to know what's going on with OpenSSL, join Slack. We discussed that there. So it's affecting newer Ubuntu. Like if you are installing Ubuntu 22 LTS, you will get that issue where your Ruby 2 won't build, only Ruby 3 will work because of OpenSSL. Yeah.
How do you, in the end, how do you work around that? Do you you can't move to Ruby 3 directly, right? So
we are planning to go Ruby 3 actually because of that. Because some of our stack already go to Ruby 3, only the old one still at Ruby 2.7. So yes, we will be moving that because of this. We don't want maintain things that suddenly break.
Sounds like a very good motivator.
Yep.
All right.
We'll
Thanks
see.
for that. Yeah, if anybody's
continue.
Yeah, I was gonna say if anybody's interested in the conversation, it's in Slack. I think it's in programming questions channel. Yeah, so if anybody's hitting the same problem, you can take a look there. Helio, do you have anything to share? Like anything you recently learned or quick tips or?
No, not at the top of my head now. I'm definitely interested in thank you, Roy, to run into that Ubuntu 22. We do have a Rails and Ruby migration kind of queued up that we kind of had to push to the side a little bit, and we'll be going to Ubuntu 22 soon. So thank you so much for sharing that, and it's kind of it's going to help me to kind of prioritize us to upgrade to do one other round of Rails and Ruby upgrade as well, so we can go to 3 and don't have that issue before we move to Ubuntu 22. So,
All right. Yeah, I guess it is an architectural thing that's affecting everybody. So it is something everybody has to work on. Okay, I guess that's all for parking lot. And I guess that's it for this month's Ruby Tuesday. So next month we might be doing a hybrid event, not 100% confirmed yet, but yeah, we likely will have a physical meetup plus online joining in. So if anybody wants like more information, be sure to check out our meetup. Let me pull up the link again. Meetup.com/ruby-malaysia, right? All our events details are there. So next one, if you want to know we're doing a physical or still purely online or hybrid, do follow us on Meetup. That's all. I guess see everybody next one. And once again, thanks for joining us, Helio.
all right, thank you. Well, a pleasure.